Hey, Patrick, how you doing, bud?
Not too bad at all, buddy. So we're doing something a bit different today.
Yeah, we're going to discuss the forgotten people of the Appalachian Mountains, West Virginia, Tennessee, like
Yeah,
that. So there is in Eastern Tennessee and all of West Virginia and the Rust Belt, people who have been forgotten about, and the system isn't getting any better for them. They're being taken advantage of. And it's as if the government is just drunk on poor people's money. So,
yeah. It is an off. The sad thing is we watched a bit of this before we recorded, and a lot of the issues that are happening to them, I seen an awful lot of council estates here in my own country. The same issues, the same predatory lending and so on. It's just strange to see that that is happening all over the world, especially in a G20 country.
well, the medical establishment isn't helping, nor is Medicare. And those programs tend to help until the last few months of your life, at which point you will generate a very, very serious medical bill that your family's going to have to adjudicate somehow. And if they don't have the resources, then you lose all the assets. The generational wealth has stopped. If it doesn't happen there, then it'll happen in a probate court. And they're predatory there as well. So
Wow.
I had to set up a trust. I had to set up a trust. There's no way I could have given anything to my kids. There's no way.
Wow. Wow. It's very, very sad when the next generation is just such, yeah, it's unbelievable. As you say, it stops generational wealth being passed on from one family member to the next to build upon the family legacy. It's very, very sad.
It is as if your last will and testament doesn't mean anything, and the court has to adjudicate all of the things. The state of California is horrific with this. They will take all of your things, sell them off, and then you'll have whatever dollars remain, but then you get taxed as a capital gain. There's a lot of wild stuff that goes on with that. It's just inappropriate. But these people are the forgotten people. These are the people that need the attention. A lot of it has to do with urban versus rural type areas. And the folks in the urban areas setting up regulations and laws and fees and processes that don't help the people who need the help.
Let's talk about the people in the United States who are living in third world conditions, specifically the people of rural Appalachia. A lot of people look at poor Americans and ask, why don't they just stop relying on the government? Or why don't they get out of their situation and go somewhere else? We are from rural Appalachia, and what a lot of people don't understand is that most poor communities want independence more than anything else. And that the problem really is that the system itself is keeping them dependent. I've had this comment come up so often that I think it's really important to talk about.
We'll talk about the voting for Republicans thing in a second, but they just want to earn money to support their family and be left the hell alone. There is such a huge amount of regulation on all of their ability to move around and function. You can't hunt, you can't build, you can't do this, you can't do that. They can't improve their lot, they can't get any kind of assistance, and then they get stuck in a job that pays far less than what they were making before, because coal mining and factory work and all those other industries are functionally regulated into non-existence. So
yeah, I see that. The problem is when as you say, an awful lot of these areas are complete, what they call them in America, a lot of them are flyover states as well. So politicians kind of leave them behind. And as we'll see later on, they make all these promises to these poor people, saying we're going to open more opportunities for you. We're going to keep the coal mines. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And time again, they're just being left behind. But as you say, no ability to look after their own families. It's very, very sad.
It means that people in the rural communities who don't represent a large amount of votes get just discredited as an entity that requires any kind of attention. So you can get a large migrant group in a larger city that is going to play a bigger role in the local politics and then statewide politics because they have a voting block in a major urban area. And then everyone else on the outside gets left out. There is no room for us to deal with you because you don't represent a block of voting that we can depend on, a lot of them just don't vote. They're like, it doesn't do any good. I don't trust you. You are two sides of the same coin, and you're both going to do us dirty.
Oh yeah, I see that in an awful lot of states over here in Ireland. I see that more and more. I see entire council states who just don't, as they said, what's the point in voting if everyone's the same?
Right. We're watching a video that talked about that a lot yesterday, where they vote against the things, but then they don't want to look bad, or they don't want to look racist. They don't want to look this or that. So because of appearances, they're not making the tough decisions. All of them have become soft, and they're pandering to the larger block of votes, which doesn't necessarily help the county or the city or the state or whatever entity at whatever level as a whole. It just benefits those who are in the urban area. And then on top of that, they pass regulations that don't affect the urban areas. Like, don't go hunting. I live in the suburbs. I'm not leaving my house to go hunting. I'm going to go to the supermarket. But people who depend on that for their livelihood, you can't shoot your guns. How am I going to go get chow? Like, I need to go kill things to get food in my house. And now you say I need to go,
or I need not just shooting. I need to go fishing. I need to do this. I need to do that. It's, as you said, there's roadblock after roadblock put in front of these people just to carry on traditions they've been doing for hundreds of years.
Yeah, their opportunities are just, they become obstacles. Any opportunity just becomes an obstacle. You have to get a license. You have to get some kind of paperwork that says you can do the thing. You can only catch one fish. I got 5 kids in a trailer. Like, one fish is not going to feed Johnny, Mikey, Jenny, Bill, and Tommy. It's not going to do it.
Yeah.
There's not enough chow to go around.
That people in rural Appalachia are voting against their own best interest.
We're going to get into why it is these communities are voting Republican. In the 2016 election, when Trump was elected, the coal miners made out pretty good. They were getting their $26 to $30 an hour. A lot of people could support themselves. So for the 2024 election, they swung for Trump, but Trump has seemed unable to assist these communities as best he could. Not quite sure why, and we'll get into it probably in the next couple episodes down the line as to why it is the forgotten people are now this time around in 47 being forgotten. There's a lot going on, so we'll let her do a little cooking here.
Yeah.
With that mindset, you are completely missing a huge part of what is currently going on in the United States and why these people are voting what you think might be against their own best interest. What you have to understand is that these people in these rural communities have been completely forgotten about and are being unhelped anyway. They do not trust the government to help them out at all because they have not been getting help. You see these impoverished communities and you think that all of these people are on food stamps or Medicaid and are getting government benefits. But the truth is that only 13% of these people receive food stamps.
So they're super proud and super independent. Again, they just want to be left alone. It's like the Midlands in Ireland. Just leave us alone. Let us tend our sheep, handle the goats, do the cows, get on our horses if we have horses, work the coal mines, work those jobs so that we can support our family. And then
I see that. I see that with a lot of pride, though. I see a lot of farmers, especially in rural Ireland, who are more than entitled, by the way, to social welfare protection, but they just want to make a hard day's work. They just want to make enough without relying on the state. So I understand that pride.
Well, it's at the center and the core of their being. They don't want somebody else giving them something. The problem is when you make a ton of regulations, then you force them into the situation. You have to take the thing we're giving you. And if you don't want it, well, you're still regulated. You still can't do the things you want to do. And it feels like an infringement upon their rights. It feels like an infringement upon their ability to provide for their family. They are being blocked and blocked and blocked, and the obstacles just keep coming. And then more regulation.
And the sad thing is that coal mining is hard work, but it's one of those industries that is, I wouldn't say it's dying out in certain parts of the world, but it is because of not just regulation, but technology moves on. Like with the United States, they're moving more and more towards nuclear. So they're trying to phase out their coal plants. And a lot of states are talking about it. Not just in middle of America, but a lot of American states are talking about moving away from coal power over to nuclear power, which unfortunately is not good news for these individuals.
The modulated nuclear plants that they're proposing on building, are really, really good as far as cheap energy. But I don't know that the energy companies are going to reduce the cost all that much, at least at the interim. There's going to have to be a cost to pay for the thing that's been built. And then we have an issue with bonds and those kinds of things, as they're not as reliable as they once were. You're not finding them in portfolios or anything like that. And if the money doesn't come in for the bonds, then the things don't get created. We're going to need the coal. We're going to need the coal. We're going to need it for a hot minute. It takes those natural resources to get all the green things up that all these people are voting for. You know how much petrol it takes and how much diesel it takes to get all of these windmills and all these solar farms and all these things put out. They're just failing. They're failing, and they're failing extravagantly. And it's costing the taxpayer money.
But as I said, there's different technologies coming online, not just nuclear, but as you're saying, wind energy, tidal, solar. There's lots of different. It's still, no matter what solution is put in place, it's still not good news unfortunately, for the coal mines.
Right, and the worst one's actually the green energy, because it takes fossil fuels. It takes the dinosaur juice to make all those things run. And in fact, it takes more dinosaur juice to run them than if we had just used it directly as a fuel for itself. It is.
Yeah, I've seen those reports before myself. They're kind of, a lot of those reports, just bear in mind, are put together by people who have invested interest. So just bear that in mind as well. Always take these reports with a big giant pinch of salt, as they would say.
How about an entire salt lick?
Yes.
Right.
You'll find that an awful lot of the biggest people who are outspoken against green energy are usually backed by the oil companies. Just always remember that. So they're kind of making sure that there's this narrative going around. But say in the long run, we have to do something to solve their energy issue.
People in rural Appalachia are extremely hardworking and are going to be working 2 to 3 jobs so that they don't have to rely on government assistance, because they don't want to. They want to be able to provide for themselves and for their families. They don't want government handouts. They just want to be able to work and to be able to afford life. And people totally discredit that fact about them.
Also, once you start getting the assistance, if you do go back to a job, there's another transition period. And on top of that, those benefits could just be cut at a whim. And if you're depending upon SSA or some other entity or SDI to give you money to survive, then you kind of become dependent on it. And then if you get a job, it's the poverty trap, where I get, say, $50,000 a year worth of benefits, but if I'm working, I'm only making $40,000 a year. Why would I do that?
We have the same issue over here. It's called, as you pointed out there, it's called a poverty trap for a reason. And the sad thing is, say if you work minimum wage in Ireland and you get, say, a job in likes of, I'm going to pick on Dunnes Stores. It's an Irish company. And say you get 30 hours a week. You'll get 16 euros an hour, roughly. Depends on what store you're in, but we'll average up to 16 euros an hour. So you'll come out with about 380 before tax. So out of that, you'll lose about 20% off, just put 20% off the top for taxation and so on. So you're losing about 70. So you're down to 310 a week. Now, 310 euros a week is not going to even get you a room in a house, rental-wise, and pay all your bills. It's not going to work. So you're stuck on relying on social protection on top of that. And even then, you're not going to get rental allowance, or because you'll be over the cap. So, as you were saying, even over here, mathematically, you're better off on the dole than you are working 30 hours a week inside a supermarket.
Well, in the supermarkets,
or even 40 hours a week.
The supermarkets here are doing a lot of strange stuff. 15 to 20 years ago, those were career-based jobs. And your schedule was fairly dependable for the next couple of weeks. You'd know when you were working. If you had to hustle a little bit to make a little money, you could. Now, almost all those places do scheduling by the week.
Yes.
So if you fall below the amount of money for a week, and you apply, but then the next week you make more than that money for that week, it's a problem, which could be solved by putting out a schedule 3 weeks ahead of time. If you had a 3-week schedule, it wouldn't be a problem. If I know I'm only going to get 14 hours in 2 weeks, then I can apply for the benefits for that week. But if I'm getting 30 hours, I can't. If I'm working 24, I can't. And then there's places like Walmart that just will not hire full-time employees, which means they're deferring all the medical care to the state, which is why we're at $2.1 trillion for Medicare and for health-related costs for the government. That includes dialysis and other things like that. All that gets wrapped up into that.
And the sad thing is, the only president I ever seen talk about that in the last couple of decades was Obama at that time, when he tried to rein in an awful lot of these big corporations, forcing, as you were saying, the states to pay for the Medicare and so on. He was trying to pass on those costs to the bigger companies, but of course didn't go anywhere because, lobbies.
Well, they were funneling the money. So when a state, especially like California ends up costing other states money, and especially our big one's LA County. LA County represents, I believe, 3% of the population of the United States. And you would say, well, that's not that much, but that's 12 million people. They've got a lock on the state of California as far as what we can do. If LA County doesn't want it, probably not going to get it. So LA County has to approve. And again, that gets rid of every rural community in the entire state up to Del Norte, which is on the northern border of Oregon, and all the way down to San Diego. It's not the best, but those places tend to lock things out, and it makes it very, very difficult to negotiate that. We're watching some of the hospice fraud stuff. They ended up with, although they have 3% of the population having 10% of the hospices, with people surviving hospice after 6 or 8 months.
Yeah, I've seen that. But the overall problem is, when we get back to this issue, is these young people, and obviously older people, stuck in these poverty traps, is there is no way for them to get out of it. As you were saying, years ago, supermarkets were a great way of, you could start on the ground floor, you work your way up to management, for instance.
Well, for sure.
Those days are gone. By the way, that doesn't just go for the United States, it also goes for retail across, say, the G20s, because they have a tendency to hire highly qualified managers now instead of just a person working their way up. If you know what I mean, it's I wouldn't say it's nepotism, but it's an awful lot of it's under pull and whatever. But at the end of the day, they're dead end jobs, and it's a sad thing to say that a lot of these jobs are dead end jobs and never going to get past a certain wage, not enough for them to survive on.
You start at bag boy and go to cashier and go to the deli, maybe become a butcher, and then get your way to management. But corporations are having huge, huge issues with ESG and having to hire based on immutable characteristics, or they get fined. If you don't have enough of X at your company, then your company will end up paying fines. You will be fined for not meeting metrics, which is where a lot of these upwardly mobile functions that there used to be. Hey, you know what? I've been in doing butcher stuff for a year and a half now. So now I want to be an assistant manager in the butcher department. No.
By the way, there was a time where supermarkets or retail in general used to send people to night classes to become managers. Remember those good old days?
I remember that.
Those days are gone as well. Yeah, those days are gone now.
Absolutely gone. But we've gotten pretty far afield. But
yes,
suffice to say, the poverty trap is an issue, and if they can just turn off the spigot of money, then you're extra done. Then you have to go find something, and there might not be something out there. And you weren't going to be working while you weren't going to be looking for a job while you're in the poverty trap. And if you are, you're just submitting something to the EDD that says, "Yeah, I'm looking for a job." Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Thanks for the check.
They see these poor towns and these poor communities, and they think that they're lazy and are just living off of welfare. And that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, they have been harmed so much by the government that they want nothing more than for the government to stop being involved in their lives.
It's their independent nature. They want to live their lives. They want to be left alone. They don't want their civil liberties violated. They don't want to be overregulated. They want to work on their house. They want to do all these things, but they can't.
And the sad thing is, you're saying there's one roadblock in front of another roadblock to stopping these people just doing what they've been doing for, 100 plus years, if not more, in a lot of these areas?
That area since the 1650s to the 1700s, living in the mountains, living a good, clean life, working the coal mines, working your ranch, doing what you can to provide for your family. And these are, for real, people of the earth. They are the salt of the earth. And they work hard. They do the best they can to provide for their families. And they're just at every turn, it is another obstacle put in their way, another regulation, another thing that's going to cause it so they have to depend on outside sources because they're forced to. And they can't just get up and go. They don't have the financial wherewithal to do it. There just isn't a way.
And it's kind of sad, as she was saying, that people from the outside are judging them. Especially as she said at the start, everyone thinks these people are on benefits. They're not. Less than 13% of them are on benefits. Crazy.
Just leave me alone. Let me live my life. Don't come and tell me anything. Don't do it. And again, so they see Republicans and Democrats as crooks. But the side that says we're going to get your coal mines back up, and we did it the last time we were in office, something's got to be done about that. That promise needs to be kept. It needs to be kept.
So the ways that they are being negatively impacted are things like extreme restrictions on like building codes and not being able to live off grid, not being able to build their own homes or sell their own food at the farmers market, not being able to hunt and fish. That's one reason why they're so pro-gun is because
big time pro-gun. But she said something super interesting there, and I need you to pay attention to that. The overregulation has caused such issues that they can't function. They're not allowed to build on their own property. They cannot live off the grid. It used to be that they would live off the grid. They didn't need to be connected. But once they get connected, they get charged. And if they don't use the power, they get charged. If they use the power, they get charged. Right? You get it coming and going. You can't get out of that system because they're not going to let you live off the grid. They want to maintain observational control of the power you're using, of the data you're using, of all the things that you're using, so that they can attempt to tax and abuse you. And it forces you down the poverty trap. If you could just live off the grid, and then if you had to go to the hospital when you needed to go to the hospital and you could just go, right, that would be good. But the thing is, they don't have the job to get the insurance because they've lost the job. They end up at Walmart without benefits, and then they have to go on SSA. But if they say no to SSA, then a single medical bill will kill their financial ability to do anything.
Yes, and that's the sad thing is a lot of these people are one bad bill away from being absolutely on the streets with very little to their name. One bad bill away.
They can't handle a $500 emergency hit. And with the cost of gas, then they can't afford car insurance and they get into a car accident and then they're personally liable, right? When gas is $7 a gallon, well, like it is out here in California, for them, it's going to be about $3.50 a gallon. But still, if you understand that the wage difference between California and West Virginia is wildly different, I could not possibly survive on $26 to $30 an hour in California. Remember, more than half of my money is going bye-bye. Before I really get a handle on it, it's already gone. And then there's taxes that you don't see. The big one being inflation. And there's all kinds of sales tax. Every city's slightly different, charges a little more here, a little less there. But it is definitely affecting the bottom line. And like I said, especially with interest, because the way the money gets distributed to the Fed, all those people get the money to purchase the assets before it gets down to, Joe Blow on the corner. He's paying top dollar for less value because of inflation. It's a tax that hits the poor and the middle class, and it's killing the middle class. And these people aren't middle class. They are poor.
Like when inflation goes up in any country, it's always the bottom 60% will get hit the hardest. That's the unfortunate maths about it. It's as you said, it's always the people at the bottom rung will always get hit, especially when it comes to food costs. That's where a lot of these people get absolutely crippled, just trying to feed their own families.
It lays mainly in the logistics, honestly. The cost of fuel and then the cost of contracts and then having to pay more taxes on those contracts to move the goods to where they have to go. It is
Yes.
insane.
Because they use guns to like go hunting, which is like one way that they provide for their families. All of these restrictions are being placed on their way of life. So you think that they're voting against their own best interest, but the main job in these areas have been coal mining. The Republicans are pro coal mining and energy through coal, and like the Democrats are not, and they are the ones who are, taking their jobs away, like from their perspective. And they're doing that without giving them another opportunity for employment. And
it's an obstacle with no alternative. There is not another way to go. And they get so poor, then they can't move. And then something happens with a family member, and then they're stuck even harder. And then on top of that, there's an opioid issue as well. And she'll get into that and we'll talk about it. But there are all these contributing factors to obstacles with no alternatives. There isn't a good way to go. They're either going to end up voting Republican or not voting at all. And they'll have gerrymandered districts where their votes won't count at all because they will ensure that the area is 52 to 53% blue as opposed to red. And that's how they'll draw the lines.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing about it is a lot of these people are so disheartened in the system. They're just not voting whatsoever. And I don't blame them for being so disillusioned with the whole system because they're being screwed over left, right, and center by everybody.
There is a way to split the districts up evenly, but they don't want to do it. They just don't.
Even if you split all these districts up in this part of the world, it's a curse on both their houses. And it's something you see more and more of, say, online, Twitter and other places, where a lot of average Americans, a lot of blue-collar workers in America are just so disillusioned with both parties that they just don't bother voting whatsoever. And you can't really blame them because both sides are, by the looks of it, from an outsider looking in, are equally as crooked. And it's kind of sad, really. There's no other option except either blue or red. That's it.
Both sides of the same coin, both wings on the same bird.
Yeah.
So we have enough technology now where we could take a state, say like California, cut it in half, put half the population above that line, half the population below that line. Split those again, half them up again, to make sure the population is half on one side, half on. Like, it's a thing that can be done.
But I don't think that.
Hold on.
But the sad thing is that's not solving the overall issue.
I get it. I understand that. But what I'm saying is they could make these districts very firm and fair as far as the numbers. And when we're disillusioned about elections anywhere, you have a problem. When you see these gerrymandered districts, I showed you Louisiana, the second and sixth.
Yeah, but that's not what these people are saying. They're not on about elections. What they're on about is both the parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. They have no faith in either of the two of them. And that's what the main issue, and a lot of hardworking Americans are saying, is both the Republicans and the Democrats are equally as crooked as each other.
Right. They're equally as crooked as each other.
That's what the problem, I've always said, the problem is when you have a two-party system like that, a lot of people who say are even in the center are homeless. There's no third or fourth choice for them to vote for. There's no third or fourth party to vote for. So these people who are stuck in the middle, who have no faith in either, are just left behind.
Well, the problem is our third party here functionally is the libertarians. The libertarians want less government, which means there's going to be less of them in general. Because the American government, since December the 23rd of 1913, has been drunk on our money. They're just drunk on our money. As far as gerrymandering goes, that is what I'm trying to evidence to you, that both sides are equally at fault.
Oh, yeah.
We gerrymander the districts to make it so it's as much one versus the other. If you did what I was saying, where you just split it up by straight population, right? That would bring back some honesty, at least from the perspective of the American people in those elections. Now, the urban areas would be a little heavier, but they would be nowhere near as heavy as when they just grab a little finger of of an urban area and then split it out based on the population there to get it so that it will not ever be anything but either one side or the other.
But isn't there, in your constitution, you have to have, there's so many representative per population level, isn't there?
So it's approximately 890,000 citizens. Well, sorry, not citizens, 890,000 bodies, 890,000 people, not necessarily citizens, are represented, which is why when you have very high migrant populations, you will have it skewed because the citizen population might be some percentage, not 100% of that area, but those people who are in that area are still represented, if be they on H-1B visas or be they authorized to work there, or if they just managed to have been counted in the census as a body in the house. So they go to a house that has 7 people in it, 2 of them are citizens, 5 of them are not. All 7 of them are counted as bodies represented by that representative. So in the House of Representatives, it is 1 per approximately 890,000 people. And in the Senate, you get 2 senators. So places like Wyoming that have just under 1 million have 1 representative, but have 2 senators.
Well, it's, yeah, as I say, it's a very unusual system. Very, very unusual system. And as you say, the gerrymandering doesn't really help people's fate in the system either.
To make money. So that is terrifying to them, to have the one real job that they can actually make money in their communities being threatened to be taken away. Like, that's a way for them to be independent and self-sufficient. It's just they want to go to work and make money, and the coal mines have been the way for them to do that. So their needs are really being disregarded and pushed aside. Also, a lot of these people are not voting anyway because they are so distrustful of the government and they see the truth. They understand that, you know, the right wing and the left wing are both the wings of the same bird.
Yeah, and that's where I got that expression from earlier. I would always say 2 sides of the same coin, but that's kind of a Appalachian Rust Belt kind of thing. Again, they're an independent people. They want to be left the hell alone. They want to make their money and they want to support their families. So the next 2 sections of the video cover the poverty trap and the Medicare trap. So the poverty trap, again, is it costs X amount of money to make a living. I'll make X amount, but it's going to be less than I'll get if I'm on benefits, right? So we went over that. And the Medicare trap is Medicare will decide or decide not to cover certain kinds of palliative care, end-of-life care, hospitalizations, going into a facility. They'll say, we'll cover X, but we're not going to cover Y. And Y happens to be $25,000, $30,000, $15,000, and the family doesn't have the money to get the house that their grandparents or parents worked very, very hard to get, but they just get this massive bill and their property gets liened and it's done. And if it doesn't go there, then it goes to probate and it's delayed. And in that process and in that time, all the taxes have to be paid while they're maintaining 2 loans, like say on a really nasty trailer that's a depreciating asset that they've liened their land to get. And then so you have 2 sets of bills and you have to pay all the bills on both of them. And when the probate process takes an excessively long amount of time, you are stuck paying taxes on both properties, utilities, everything on both properties. So something's got to give. And you can't move into the property that is the generational property that either your parents or grandparents had, but you're still liable for all those things. And you can't be off the grid, right? So you're stuck. You can't say, well, that's my property. Government says, well, you didn't pay X, Y, and Z bill. I didn't have any money. It's stuck in probate. Sucks for you. You didn't have enough money in the bank to cover it. Yeah, because I can't make money because you've shut down all the jobs. And because of right?
That is
right.
But that's a massive issue in the United States in general, is medical debt. It is I've seen more and more saying, like the Dave Ramsey shows and so on, when they're talking about finances in the United States.
Right.
A lot of debt that people carry are just from everyday medical debt, like going to the dentist, going to get glasses or so on, just basic, not even emergency debts, just everyday living, as they would say.
Until the early 1900s in the world, your teeth were in the top 5 of things that would kill you. You don't think about it now, But if your teeth go bad back in the day, you're dead. You're just dead. Nothing to do. Nobody pulled teeth, nobody do root canals, none of that stuff. So the dental care was super important. And there was another thing that she discussed in there that's super important. And it's a pretty long section, so I'll just go over it for you. So the medical care that they receive, working 2 or 3 jobs and injuring themselves, but not being able to stop working because they can't get the time off, they can't get the physical therapy, they can't get any of the other kinds of care that you would get were you injured, is to put them on opioids. And they would get them addicted to opioids, and people would look down on them. Well, they've worked 2 or 3 jobs. Their bodies are shot. Their bodies are destroyed. The only way they can keep going is by numbing. And they do it with opioids. And it is horrific bad. So,
oh, wow.
It is the only way that they can keep their bodies going to keep doing the work to provide for their families, and they don't get a break. Like, you think you don't get a break? Try not having dental care. Try not having medical care. Try all of these things. Walk a mile in their shoes. Walk a mile in their shoes and see if you could possibly survive.
Yes. I think a lot of people have done. I remember years ago when I was working in the hotel industry, many, many decades ago when I was a younger man, as they would say. And I remember working, delivery days when you're bringing kegs and a lot of heavy lifting for 3 or 4 days at a time, if not more. Well, during summer, you had deliveries nearly 7 days a week. It takes a massive toll, even on a young person's body. It takes a massive toll on it. And I don't think these people understand that 20 years down the road with coal mining and so on, as she was saying, the toll, as you were saying, the physical toll on every bone in your body is unbelievable.
There are some jobs in the United States where you're considered to be an occupational athlete. Are you aware of the term?
Yes, I've heard. Yeah.
Right.
Work fit, as they would say. Yeah.
Right. So if you're a firefighter or you're a peace officer, or if you're a member of the military, your physical fitness is a massive component. Massive. But when you're working coal mines, or you're working the oil derricks, or you're deep sea fishing on those boats, you are busting your ass for as many hours as you possibly can, not just for the overtime, which is good money, right? Working the overtime is good money, but you are working those hours because the money is available to be made right now. And you can't take a break. You will work 16, 20 hours a day, go home for a couple hours, wash your ass, and get back on it. And they will do it for weeks on end. Weeks on end. Construction work. I know guys who work 7/12s. Now, stop and think about that. People whine and bitch about stocking shelves. They whine and bitch about $60 60-pound dog food containers, bags they got to carry, right? These dudes are working. You think it's work, but these men are working, and it's not even a joke. And they hurt themselves, and they will not stop. And they will not stop because their families depend on them. And when they get just backed into a corner, all they can do is take the opioids and get their ass back to work. There's no choice there. There's no option. There's no opportunity. There's obstacles, and people have been forgotten about. And it is absolutely fucking disgusting that they get treated this way.
Yes, I fully agree with everything you just said there, because I've known so many guys over here, especially during the Celtic Tiger days, when most of them got absolutely, once the building industry went the way it went in Ireland from 2008 onwards, they were just completely left behind to fend for themselves. Yeah, it's disgusting.
Oh, it's unforgivable. Like, this is a group of people that really, really needs to be paid attention to. And we're going to talk here about some of the opportunities that they don't have, and then we're going to close this thing down. So we're going to talk about educational opportunities in trade schools and things like that. We're going to go ahead and let her cook.
Or get ahead. Most people have no idea what it's like to grow up in rural Appalachia or any very poor, impoverished community. And so they make assumptions on what they're like, what their lifestyle is like, and are not willing to listen.
On that note, there are some places, if you guys get a chance, look up a place called Bradley, California. Was a thriving community, and with overregulation and agricultural regulation, the community is dead.
Wow.
And there's a lot of places like that in a very successful state like California. We had the tech boom in the Silicon Valley, and we have had the Hollywood industry in LA, and we've had all these amazing industries. But the people that provide food for a lot of the country are the Central Valley farmers. And they have just lost their ability. It's like corporate farming when it comes to places like Kansas and Nebraska, Oklahoma, Iowa. There's a lot of corporate and ag farming where it costs. It used to be you could buy a tractor for a reasonable amount of money. Now to buy a good tractor, $200,000 to buy that tractor. And then now they're not even allowed to work on their own tractors. They have to get a repair contract with some company. I'm not going to say their name. The trucks are green, by the way. They're green tractors. Just so you know, maybe
even I know who you're on about there from this neck of the woods. Yeah,
maybe your boy.
I think we all know the company.
Yeah, maybe your boy John isn't treating you well. You know, the rep guy. Anyway, but it's a bad deal, and they just keep piling it on. It makes it so you can only have corporate farming. That's it. There isn't another way to do it because the family farms just cannot afford to farm the land anymore. And with the drought we had for years upon years upon years, where the Central Valley literally almost dried up, they were a couple of years out from just the complete destruction of the land. Thank God the rain came back to California, and that didn't happen. But there's lots of communities that were these poorer communities that were just squeezed out. And it wasn't but just a few years ago when the cities, the urban areas in the United States had more of a population than the rural areas. It's a pretty recent development, right? So,
wow.
Yeah. And there's a lot to go into on that, but we don't have 2 hours to have that discussion.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
yeah, but we'll definitely circle back to it, though. It's very, very interesting.
What they have to say. So they don't have the experience to understand why they make the choices that they do. And instead of trying to understand, they place judgment based on their personal life experience. If you want to understand somebody and why people do what they do, you have to realize their problems and what their day-to-day life is and what their struggles are and what their goals are. Another big question that I get is like, why don't they just get an education and get out of the situation? That's a lack of understanding of what education.
So do you know where the money for education comes from in a lot of communities in the United States?
From the federal government, isn't it?
Property taxes.
Property taxes, yeah.
Property taxes.
To local government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you have people that would really rather live off the grid and they don't want to give the money out and they don't want to get the loans to buy the other things and pay all those property taxes, your school system isn't going to be top notch, let's say. Yeah, definitely not top shelf, top tier, top nothing. It's bottom of.
Wow.
But when you have parents who are making a decent wage and they can assist with homeschooling and those kinds of things, then you can actually have good critical thinking kids who get to college and they have a real, head on their shoulders, or they can freely choose to go into a trade, which is a really great way to go to support your family. But they don't have those opportunities. Those opportunities just aren't there.
I see that with an awful lot of people, even in council estates here in Ireland, and poor college is just not an option.
No,
they financially just cannot afford it.
And then the trade school becomes not an option as well, right? Because they are not going to hire people that are going to want to earn as much as you want to earn performing that task. They'll try and get someone from the outside. And if that fails, then they just won't fill a job. And then you won't be able to create the things you need for infrastructure in your society.
Even though a lot of our education is, well, when I say free, but not 100% free, but it's still not an option for an awful lot of young people. Most of them, you're lucky from a lot of these areas, you're lucky to get them past their junior cert, let alone their leaving cert. It's because they just don't see a future for themselves anywhere. There's no hope. There's no hope in their eyes, which is a shame as well. And I say that's what she's trying to get to there as well. There's a lot of these people don't see any way of bettering themselves because as everything is just falling down around them.
Have you heard of the term bureaucratic creep?
Yes, I've heard it.
In the educational system in the United States, it is an administrative creep, right? So we have had recent 15, 20 years or so, maybe 30 or 40, since like the early 90s, there's been a massive increase in administrators. And I told you about the school boards, and we saw how much money some of those principals and stuff were making in the top end areas in Washington State. It's bad there, but it's worse in some of these places. The school boards get whatever money they get, and as opposed to ensuring teachers get more pay, these school boards decide to pay themselves, and they hire more administrators and people that aren't actually contributing to the overall function. They're just hiring assistants so they look important, or for whatever reason. And they can pass that because they're on the school board and they're the ones that decide where the money goes.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is the sad thing about poor communities is, I know what you're on about there, the rising lack of teachers. But the sad thing over here is we have teachers, but what we have is a debt of hope for people. No matter, I know you're on about bureaucratic creep and so on, but I think there's a bigger issue when it comes to poorer communities. It's not just about, it's to show young people a better future for themselves by improving their local communities, like bringing some sort of industry to these areas, or trade schools, or try to build these kids back up or build these communities back up. I think there's a better way of going around it.
So use an expression, the debt of hope. And that is a really good expression. They do not have something to aspire to look to. They don't have good leaders in the community. They don't even have a sense of community at all. They feel like they're individuals out there trying to make their headway in the storm, and that storm is not abating at all.
No, unfortunately.
Is like in these communities. Schools are funded via property taxes. And so these schools are underfunded. It's hard to learn when you're hungry and when you've been up half the night working to help provide for your family. When all of the jobs around you are things like coal mining or factory work or working at the Walmart or fixing cars. Like, these are trade skills. You don't need to go to college to get trade skills. And children's possibilities in life are based off of, experience and role models, and they're imitators. And people's goals shouldn't be to leave your family and leave your community to.
We're gonna end it up on that one. So you shouldn't be expected to leave the area in which you reside to become successful. The American dream should be accessible at all places in this great land. It just should be. Just like under the tricolor in the Republic of Ireland. You should have those opportunities in the Midlands like you do in Dublin or Cork City. That should be the way.
You're right. In the reality, in a decent world, that should be an option. But unfortunately, as she was pointing out there's no industry around them that will supply these jobs that they're relying on so heavily, like as she was saying, coal mining and so on. So there should be more of a way of getting them into the trades, become electricians, carpenters, and so on.
Yeah, metal workers, pipe fitters, sheet metal guys. Yeah.
And by the way, I know everyone wants to stay in their area, but unfortunately, the way the modern world is, there was a time where you could get a job within 20 miles of where you live and have it for 30 or 40 years and then retire and stay in the same rough area. But unfortunately, the way jobs are now, they're more mobile, or they're more have to do a bit of traveling. Even same probably in California.
Oh, for sure. I know you're from Ireland and you're not aware of just how big this place is.
Yes.
If you visit, and I think you're supposed to visit sometime soon, we're going to be in the car for hours to get to a thing. There isn't a choice to go see the thing. Understanding
I've done a fair bit of driving in my time.
Right. So how long does it take to drive from the southern end? How long does it take to drive from Cork City to Belfast if we discount getting into Northern Ireland over the border? How long does it take?
Oh, well, the biggest bottleneck is through Dublin. So say with traffic, say if I leave early in the morning, I'll 3.5, 4 hours.
So to get from the bottom of your country to the top of what should be your country in Belfast, 3.5, 4 hours.
Yes. Bear in mind, most that's a motorway, so yeah.
So you're going at a pretty good clip, say 100
Yes.
kilometers an hour ish?
120, yeah.
120.
120, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So
well, it depends on what load I have. So if I'm fully loaded, very rarely hit 100.
So California has some places with a 75 mile an hour speed limit. At 75 miles an hour, it's still going to take you more than 12 hours to get from the bottom of the state to the top of the state.
All right.
And to get anywhere that you want to go, you have no idea.
How come you're going so slow?
75 miles an hour is faster than 120 kilometers an hour, if I'm doing my math correctly.
Yes, you are. I'm only trying to wind you up. But by the way, why don't you just have normal measurements like the rest of us?
Oh, well, because we use freedom units, of course.
Oh yeah, of course you do.
We use
they don't call that
moon units.
Yeah, they don't call that. Well, India landed on the moon, so did a lot of other countries. But he put a man up there anyway, at least.
Yeah. Thank you, Neil Armstrong, for taking one small step. All right. So
right.
So all the fun aside, and the banter, because this is really a heavy subject, there are forgotten people in my country, and we really need to step up and do what we can. We need to get some deregulation in there, let these people work on their land. If somebody wants to live off the grid, let them live off the damn grid. Like, stop regulating these people. Stop forcing their independence away from them. The reason our country is so strong is because of that strong, independent nature. And if you want to talk about the combatants in World War II that came out of those coal mines in West Virginia and East Tennessee, those are some of the hardest fighting, bravest men this country has ever seen. Right?
Yes.
And if for whatever reason you want to choose to disrespect that legacy, I am not proud of you for doing it. Not even a little bit. I have some other choice words, but I want this video to get maybe monetized.
Yes.
So I'm going to be friendly about it.
So, just remember the rules on YouTube. I'll keep having to remind you sometimes.
Yeah. So anything else for the good of the people there, Patrick?
No, but I fully agree with you. I think the sad thing is, all across all the G20s, is there seems to be a lot of people just left behind. A lot of people in these communities are just left behind and forgotten. Wow. Sad, really.
And it seems like the city folk are forgetting the country folk, but one day they'll get hungry and they'll realize maybe they screwed up. Maybe you should fix yourself and treat people who work hard with respect as opposed to looking down your nose at them.
Yes, exactly.
All right. For Patrick McCallum, I am Alex Johansson. Like the like, ring the bell, subscribe, help us beat the algorithm. We're the A&P Gents, and we are out.